Okay, joining me today again at the Playback Mansion is my good friend Ed Homewood, Old Guy HiFi. We're streaming through Riverstream FM, and I'm
Riverside.
going to ask him about
Yeah,
Riverside.
no
Thank you.
problem.
Thank you. I probably got that wrong a bunch of times. Anyway, so today's all about DACs. So I'm going to ask him some questions I'm wondering about, and hopefully it's something that you at home are also wondering about. So first of all, congratulations on your new DAC design. I mean, I know you didn't design it from the ground
No,
up,
but
but you had a lot of
I did have a
input.
little bit of input on it. That's the Douk Q100. Yeah, it's a different product. It's certainly a different product for them. I mean, at $500, it's the most expensive product they manufacture. They sell a couple of tube amps. I think they source from someone else, for 500 or so dollars. But this, for their own brand, this was a big one. They also have, quote unquote, what they're trying to promote as a premium brand called Ampapa. And there was thought of making this an Ampapa piece, but Ampapa is more for the U.S. market than it is for their domestic market, their home market. So this stayed a Douk product.
So speaking of domestic market, what is it about the M Papa that you think is more for our market?
Just the kind of the user interface. I mean, if you notice, it's the Ampapa products, or you will see the Ampapa products are all finished in black, which is a bit, they will tell you, and you can see it, you prove it. I mean, black equipment sells better in the US than does something that is silver with gold trim. I mean, that's very much a design for their domestic market. And that's fine. I don't care what it looks like. I care what it sounds like. So I get that. I mean, their domestic market is 5 times the size of the US market. So
Right.
you got to
Yeah.
go where the money is.
Yeah. So speaking of the sound quality of it, so you voiced this yourself, and I know you listen to a broad array of genres of music. How would you describe the listening experience of that amp
Oh,
or that
yeah.
DAC?
So we could do an R ladder deck. The problem with that is when you're under $1,000 or under $750 on a R ladder deck, you can't have the same number of resistors to actually do a full 24-bit word decoding. So there's a little bit of massaging going on in there. So there's some good entry-level ladder decks. FIO makes a couple. There's the one from Apos Audio, the Druid that goes with their Gremlin and Merlin stuff. But those are very inexpensive, and they're not full resolution ladders. So there's a little trickery going on. So the best way to get around that was to use a chipset that mimics basically a ladder deck, and that is the AKM 4499 4191. So in a traditional Delta Sigma deck, the Burr Browns, the TIs, the Cirrus Logics, the Wolfson, I'm going to take ESS and set it aside for a second. In those older, more traditional DAC chips, they only oversample 8 times. So that means there's not a lot of switching noise to get out of the circuitry. And they can do a full 16 or 24-bit word, but they can process more than 1 bit at a time. A pure Delta Sigma deck, like an ESS, can only process 1 bit at a time, and it has to oversample 256 times to do that processing. So there's a ton of switching noise that you have to get rid of. And to me, and to my ear, those kinds of DACs that oversample at that rate have what I call digital glare or saber glare. It's just harsh sounding. Now, AKM got around that by using 2 chips. The 4191 is actually the Delta Sigma chip. That's where the oversampling is done, DSP is done, noise shaping, timing, DSD conversion is done, all of that. And then the 4499 is actually a multi-bit switched resistor chip. So it's just a pure analog DAC. So the Delta Sigma does the processing and it sends just straight PCM, completely filtered, noise-free, to the 4499, and then that converts it to an analog signal. And in my mind, it is better than any of the entry-level. I think it's a great DAC chip, even at, I've got some $2,000 DACs that have it in there. It gives the best of the high signal noise ratio and real accuracy of Delta Sigma without the glare. It's a much warmer, more neutral, more natural sound. So when we designed this particular DAC, it didn't really matter what the genre of music was for me, because any music, a good DAC should do any music and it should sound natural. The key thing was the analog section of it and how it was voiced. And the goal with this one was it is very much voiced to a Western ear. And that means it's a little bit warmer, it's a little bit lusher, there's a little bit more mid-bass energy, a little bit more bass energy. And that was kind of the key thing. So the way it was laid out, it's a fully balanced internal configuration. The op amps that we chose to use in it were chosen, and they're not swappable, and we're never going to make them swappable because, you know, we used a super high-speed, really expensive premium op amp in the TI 1612s. And I think it just sounds wonderful. It's very clean, very neutral, but has a warmth and a listenability. Because I sit and listen for hours. I mean, I'm a retired guy. This is, you know, the YouTube stuff is what I do for fun. And, you know, I'll sit and listen to evaluate a piece of gear. You know, if anybody watched the video and looked closely, when I opened this up and you saw the board inside, it was dated May of 2025. That's how long we've been working on this thing. And so, you know, I've listened to it for hundreds of hours. And that's the key thing. I try to listen to a product for literally hundreds of hours. And that's really the only way you can get a real handle on it is you kind of get used to the sound and and then when something changes, oh, wait a minute, you know right away what it is.
And it sounds like that new AKM, you say 4491, sounds kind of similar to traditional PCM chips.
It is, and it isn't. So because it's a dual chip, they can take the workload and split it. So you got the Delta Sigma on the 4191, and you've got the multi-bit switched resistor. And it's a hybrid. It's not a true multi-bit DAC, but it is an analog chip. I mean, it's only looking at PCM, or it doesn't even really do. The truth is, nothing does DSD super natively anyway. And who cares? I mean, seriously, there's unless you got SACDs and then you're locked into Sony anyway. So the DSD processing is done in the Delta Sigma side, and then the analog processing is done on the multi-bit switch resistor chip. So yes, like in the old days, the old Burr Browns and TIs and Philips chips from the 80s and the late 80s and into the early 90s, those were a multi-bit, basically a hybrid, you know, switched resistor sort of thing, almost like a ladder on a chip, but not really. Because you can't to do 24-bit, you need 196 resistors per channel. And they all need to be like 0.001% tolerance and very thermally efficient. And remember, each resistor is either double the next resistor or half the previous resistor. So they really have to be very precise. And that's where it gets really expensive. And that's why you see, you know, the real premium R2R DACs, you know, started about $1,000 or thereabout.
You're talking about chips from the 80s and 90s. How do you know so much about this stuff? Like, what was your involvement in this back in those days?
We had 5 stores here in Chicago, so we were involved, you know, a lot with when CDs came out and CD players and so forth. I mean, I bought my first standalone DAC, just a DAC, in 1988. So I've been doing this for a long time, and it's you know, something I'm very interested in and something I know a little bit about. I've worked for a couple of manufacturers. I've been involved in the design of other products and all kinds of other stuff, and I've spent a lot of time around engineers and. You know, it just, you pick the stuff up, I guess. And then I have this, you know, memory of all this crap, but, you know, ask me what year my daughter was born. I couldn't tell you. I know her birth date, but I don't know the year necessarily. So, you know, your brain fills up with the weird stuff, and that's my stuff. It's just interesting to me because digital was such a revolution, you know, when it first came out. And then, of course, we all sat around and thought, this sounds horrible. I mean, the first CD players from Sony and Philips were terrible. I mean, the first CD players from both of them didn't process all 16 bits. They only processed 14. They threw out the least significant bit and the most significant bit, and then just processed those 14. And, you know, you'll hear a lot of people say, you know, they were harsh, they were terrible sounding. Of course, no one knew how to mix for CD. Everybody was still kind of mixing for analog, you know, for LP stuff. And, of course, for mixing for LP, you got to remember that the RIAA curve sucks out everything, you know, all the bass and everything else. So it's got to be put back in. So when you mix, you got to kind of take that into account. Well, with CDs, we didn't have that issue. And it's just the evolution of it is pretty fascinating. I mean, I got my first CD burner in 1988 as well. So it's nothing, it's not new. It just was stupid expensive in those days, but we had the store, so I really didn't care. It's just fascinating to me. I think the goal for me, if I'm going to listen to something and I really want to listen for pleasure and for enjoyment and everything, it's going to be vinyl. Without question, it's going to be vinyl, or it's going to be CD. I just think CD sounds better than streaming. And so for CD, it's important then to get a DAC that kind of suits your listening preferences, because they do sound different. There is no perfect DAC. If there was a perfect DAC, there'd only be one model available.
So you're saying that CD and vinyl are your preference, and you're saying so CD is better than streaming. Is CD also better than FLACs and DSP?
Oh, absolutely. Remember, CD is uncompressed. Period. FLAC is what's called free lossless audio codec, which means it's processed. It's a CD, basically internally in a CD, all the communication's handled by what they call I²S. So when you read a CD, it's going I²S into the DAC or, whatever. Now, if you've got an old CD player and you're taking your coax or optical output, it's taking that I²S information, converting it to SPDIF, sending it out at 24.192, because that's the maximum SPDIF can do, because the technology specifications were set in 1981 or 1980. Right, that's fine. What can you find anywhere on a streaming service that's greater than 24.196? Nothing. And there's nothing greater than DSD 64, honestly. And that's the other thing. And I probably will do a whole video on it. Everybody wants to upsample everything. They take upsampling their CDs or their FLAC files or whatever to DSD 512 actually does something. It doesn't. You can't create information. Now, but that's the thing, is you can go to DSD64 and do exactly the same thing. The difference between DSD64 and 512, you can't hear. Honestly, the difference between 24.196 and DSD64 is next to impossible to hear. A lot of it just becomes audiophile catnip. Here's the thing: if you turn it on, and after 10 or 15 minutes, your foot's tapping and your head's bobbing and you're enjoying yourself and you're thinking about the next track or CD or album you want to play, guess what? That's good enough.
Totally. I totally agree.
It's all about listening to music, not about the boxes, for crying out loud.
I see you have the Mission 770s back there. I have a pair upstairs, and I just realized the other day that I really enjoy them almost parallel to the wall. I was trying different orientations. Do you have yours pretty straightforward?
No, and actually, I just got finished filming the review of it, and I've got to pack them up to get them to go back to the folks at Mission. I don't try not to hang on to stuff too excessively long. What I found, and again, you have to remember, my room is very unique in that it was built as a sound room specifically. So where my speakers sit, they're 4 feet out from the back, the front, what would be called the front wall, or the wall behind the speakers. But that's a false wall, and there's another concrete wall 4 feet behind that, because all of my equipment is flush into a wall. And then I can get in behind and go and connect all the wires. I was digging around back there today, hooking up some networking gear. So I have the speakers about 4 feet from the wall behind them. They're about 4 feet from any side boundaries. They're about 11 feet apart. And I thought, for me, playing around with them, I had them towed in so that each tweeter was aimed over my shoulders, just to the outside of my shoulders. And I was getting a huge image. That is what a marvelous speaker that is. And I love Peter Como designs. And, and because I'm a big Wharfdale fan, and of course, Wharfdale and Mission are in the same family of IAG, International Audio Group. And so Peter, some of his designs are Wharfdale products as well. And they just have that. Here's my take on it. Mission and Wharfdale are the last two British speaker companies that are old school and adhere to what it was originally the British sound that everybody fell in love with Morden Short and B&W and Kef back in the day. Nowadays, I'm sorry, I don't think B&W and Kef, they've lost the message somewhere along the line. And they're trying to be,
chasing detail.
I guess. I don't know.
Detail.
Detail. I don't know. They're chasing more of a European tuning, more like a Focal or a Sonus Faber. It's a little bit extra energy up on the top end, a little bit extra mid-range energy. And I'll be dead honest with you, a lot of that is because they're trying to sell products into the Asian marketplace. And that is a sonic preference they have. So if you know that you're going to sell, your $100,000 pair of speakers primarily to an Asian market, you're going to tune it for that market, as you should. I mean, if you're going to, make.
That's how you stay
That's
in
how
business.
you stay in business, and you have to take into account your individual market, which is why, this was done differently than typical. Again, this was kind of tuned to a Western ear rather than a traditional Asian sonic preference. And there's nothing wrong with any preference. Everybody has their own, and they should. And the biggest thing I think most people don't do is try to figure out what their preference is, because I get. In my comment section, I get comments all the time. Well, is this better than that? I can't answer that question for you. You got to listen to it. I mean, what I hear to my ear is going to be different than what you hear to your ear. Now, we may have some commonalities. There may be some common things that we both like. We both like that little extra bass those 770s give, the speed of those 8-inch woofers. I love that speaker. I really don't want to send it back, but I can't afford to buy them, and I don't need anything else.
Yeah, I can imagine. You have plenty of stuff to review.
I got 2 giant pairs of Magnepans. I got the Martin Logans. Of course, I've reviewed all those other than the big Magnepan 2.7Xs. That review's coming up. But I'm waiting on a company called Magnerizer is sending me a pair of stands for those rather than use the factory stand, which should improve things a lot, because I'm an isolation guy. I'm not a spike guy. I don't like mass loading things. So I like isolation. So I use isoacoustics under all of my speakers, and the current Magnepan stands don't accommodate that. These Magnerizer stands do. So we'll go and see where that goes.
So then one last quick question. You said your isolation versus
mass loading,
dampening, or mass loading, right?
Spikes.
So, can you describe what the sonic differences are in those two?
Okay. So if you mass load, the idea is that it's supposed to transfer the vibrations into the floor. Why? Do you want your room resonating? That's the problem. And also mass loading only transfers a very narrow frequency band. So if you have a good set of stands and you have the speakers mounted properly, maybe on some sorbethane footers or whatever, on the stand, and you have isolation, what winds up happening is the speaker isolates from the stand is isolated from the floor. So a big metal stand full of sand isn't going to resonate. And I think just the isolation just keeps the sound, it just sounds much cleaner. I've detected resonances because I was a spike guy for years. And when I went to isolation, the image snapped into focus. It got deeper, it got broader, it got wider. It was just so much better. And it was.
So all the energy is being contained within the speaker mostly the speaker, somewhat in the stand, but not as much in the floor.
Or in the room.
The mass loading, then the room is becoming part of the resonant chain.
Where with the isolation, it absorbs that resonance. Right, so it's not getting transmitted to the floor.
It's more localized.
Yeah, it's reducing the amount of resonance. If you don't have a heavy stand, a sand-filled stand, inert stand, the isolation, especially isoacoustics, will absorb that extra energy, and it dissipates it and actually, to get theoretical with it, any vibration in an isoacoustic stand gets converted to heat. You can't feel the heat, but that's what happens with it. And then if you have stands. My recommendation is, if the manufacturer supplied stands, which Mission did on the 770s, I actually use sorbethane pucks and put them between the speaker and the stand, because again, that will absorb some of the resonance. And then again, with the isoacoustic suite, it absorbs some of the resonance. So it really makes it a very inert, and those boxes on the 770s are totally inert anyway. You can wrap your knuckle on them, sounds like concrete. So keeping it as inert as possible. If you watched how they ever test a speaker, in an anechoic chamber, I've been fortunate enough to be in a bunch of different anechoic chambers, one of the largest in the world out in Chatsworth, California, JBLs. And those speakers are basically suspended so that there's no vibrations leaving the box. Everything stays within the box. And that's how they design and measure those things. So why would you want to transmit that energy that was designed into the box and designed into the system into the floor of your room and then have that add resonance?
Looks like I got to drain the sand out of my speaker.
No,
stands.
Keep the sand in it. Put some isoacoustics underneath it or some isolation feet underneath it. Yeah. Plus, it won't tear up your floors.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Well, this has been a great conversation as always, Ed. And I learn like every time I talk to you. So
No problem.
thank you again for
Oh,
joining
it's
me.
my pleasure. Thanks so much.
And check out Ed's Mission 770 review.
That'll be out in a couple
please
weeks.
Please tell me the name of the deck.
Oh, it is the Douk, Douk Q100.
Yeah.
There we go. You can't see it.
Okay.
Anyway.
Not like John Wayne Duke.
No, Douk.
The same.
Douk Audio. Most people will be familiar with them. They've been around for quite a while, and they've got a bunch of different products. But this is their premium. This is their top of the line DAC unit, and it's become, I think, my sub $500 reference DAC especially for any kind of Delta Sigma sort of processing.
Awesome. Yeah. All right, I'll talk soon.
Thanks, Ryan.